compact cars are still an essential part of the market. And the most influential of them has oftentimes been the Honda Civic. I'm driving the entry-level Sport Hybrid. For the hatchback, you're gonna spend 31 grand. While that might be hard to swallow, you can still get a bare bones LX without the electrification for much less. And honestly, gawking at the numbers doesn't tell you most of the story. Value is all relative, so let's bring in some of its key competitors. The Mazda3, like the Honda, prioritizes premium attributes. I think it offers more quality, it packs more power, but considerably less versatility. The Subaru Impreza is a comfortable all-wheel drive box of polyurethanes. Its utilitarian approach makes a lot of sense, but there are a few drawbacks that keep it from being a sales knockout. Both the Subaru and Honda offer stripper models, whereas the Mazda stays classy no matter the configuration. No unpainted mirror caps, no steel wheels, and more displacement. Don't fret, Toyota fans, the Corolla will make an appearance later, and I'm making a dedicated Honda versus Toyota hybrid video soon. To catch that video and more fun detailed car content, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. Thank you. I'd also like to thank Royal South Toyota and Mazda, along with the service department at Royal on the East Side, for letting me test drive a few of the cars used in today's video. The staff at Royal is comprised of knowledgeable, easygoing people. If you're in the market, check them out and tell them thanks for me. Compared to the Honda and Subaru, the Mazda3 offers more high-end features, including a 360 view camera, a head-up display, a heated steering wheel, and more soft-touch materials. Even your more entry-level trims like the Select Sport have padding all around and contrast stitching. And despite the age, this is still the cabin I'd want to spend the most time in. There's a physicality to it. All of your buttons, dials, and levers give you nice feedback. And there's not an abundance of controls embedded into the infotainment. This setup has been oversimplified so that it's easy to use in motion through the control dial that rests where my hand naturally lies. Once you get used to it, I think it's a lot less distracting than most touchscreens, though it can get a touch function and wireless CarPlay if you indulge on a high trim. Another thing that could be polarizing are the seats. They're a touch narrow, especially around my shoulders. For me at 6'3", I can find a good driving position. I have enough thigh support, and lumbar adjustment comes on several trims. The interior of the 3 does a remarkably good job at being simple and upscale, but you will have to make some sacrifices here. So one, you do have some large cubbies, but the cup holders are kind of small and placed in a way that they can block the climate controls if anything tall goes into them. The windows are also down on size, hampering visibility. Some might even label it as claustrophobic, especially if they are sitting in the back seat. It is tight. And the cargo area, while not embarrassing, is down on size when compared to the Subaru or Honda. On the flip side, the cargo area of the Honda might be the most versatile of its class. It could easily replace a lot of small crossovers. The back seat is less impressive, but still good enough for 6-footers to fit in either row without feuding. And up front, the Civic also expresses harsh feelings for tech. But instead of trying to find some alternative solution like Mazda, Honda just gave you the infotainment equivalent to walkie-talkies. This feels very rudimentary in 2025. Maybe some of you will appreciate that it's sometimes buggy with Apple CarPlay, which is wired only. The response time is actually fine, but the resolution is fuzzy. Though if you spend a lot of money in spring for a sport touring, you get a much better infotainment with wireless CarPlay and Google built-in stuff. Thankfully, all Civics will have these very satisfying buttons and knobs. They click and tick like a Dodge V8. The construction of the interior feels solid, and the finish of the plastics isn't half bad either. It doesn't feel like an expensive car, but it feels well built and generally looks upscale for a compact. It's almost like an old school German approach. And if you go with the Sport, you get good features like heated seats, a sunroof, proximity entry, and 6 speakers. The standard car just has 4, which is a fault with the base model Subaru as well. If you like music and you have some hearing left, you'll appreciate upgrading so that you can get some tweeters. Like the Mazda, if you keep climbing up the trims, you'll get a Bose sound system that outperforms most other cars in the class. class. However, there's no avoiding these seats. Now, I think the seat back is well shaped. It actually has some nice bolstering that should still work for most people. But for me, I found the seat bottoms to have a vendetta against tailbones. They're firm and have an awkward contour. For this kind of money, you're not gonna find the perfect cabin. However, the Honda's blend of a tactile feel, simplicity, and space should be greatly appreciated by many, especially when compared to the Subaru. This uses plastic and tech that could have been sourced from children's toys, but this is the interior that you want if you demand the most from your compact. If you drive a lot, I think these seats are the most agreeable. They're wide, supportive, and well-shaped. I think this is easier than the other two to get in and out of. The visibility is also insanely good. It feels very open. The materials, while again mostly hard-touch plastics, feel sturdy and easy to clean. And like the Honda, it's practical. You can fit tall adults in the back. The cargo area is wide and has some height too, though similar to the hybrid Honda, there's no spare tire. As far as small cars go, you're not making many compromises with the Subaru outside of the infotainment. Both the dual screen and big screen are slow, it can be hard to read in direct sunlight, and it holds most of the car's controls. At least wireless CarPlay comes on 2 of the 3 trims, and they left you some of the important buttons and dials, so it's not just all baked in digitally. The Subaru Impreza is the Swiss Army knife of small vehicles. Actually, that's too cliche. This is the windbreaker pants of compact cars. It's not flashy or prestigious, but it is well-priced, comfortable, and noisy. So most of these will have a 2-liter naturally aspirated Boxer 4 mated to a continuously variable transmission. Flat out, this accelerates like a golf cart, but for most usage, it doesn't feel like you have to floor it to get the car going. It's also pretty smooth in its power delivery and reasonably responsive. Expect 0 to 60 to come up in about 9 seconds. This does have enough passing power, but it is pretty often stressed out, it seems. So if you find yourself at high elevation or you just demand more from your powertrains, you might want to step up to the 2.5 liter, which drops the 0 to 60 by a second. It makes it feel a little bit less tense. That too is not athletic, but if you want more performance, Subaru does make a WRX, so maybe consider that, especially if you want a manual transmission. What makes the Impreza so appealing is how pleasant it is when the world is harsh. This is the most forgiving car here. It also has independent rear suspension, so it can float over small imperfections, and over the big stuff, it's soft, so it's just not phased much. This does come at the cost of some handling chops. Thankfully, the Boxer engine does do its part in lowering the center of gravity, so body roll is kept in check, but when you're really pushing the car, it can get a little bouncy. The Sport and RS make a difference there, but nothing dramatic. Still, I think this is a confident car, and that attribute is made stronger by standard full-time all-wheel drive. This setup is also unique in that it uses equal-length drive shafts, which help improve balance. You're not going to have any sort of torque steer. This would be a really good, cheap-to-run winter daily driver. Cruising up at highway speeds, the Impreza is a nice companion. Wind noise is pronounced, and the engine shouts under acceleration, but the car settles down while you're cruising. Again, the seats are comfortable, the driving position works for tall people, and the fuel tank is large, which compensates some for its subpar efficiency by today's standards. But it does at least seem to easily hit its EPA numbers, and even on a back road, they did improve this quite a bit for the new generation. The steering now offers just a cough of feedback and more precision. There's no vagueness on center, it retains a very quick ratio so you can change direction fast, and the light weighting also makes it easy to drive. The reason why I wouldn't consider this fun is, well, one, it's not all that sharp, and two, there's like no buildup in weight. If that kind of thing is important to you, you'll probably be more interested in the next two cars. Under the hood, every Honda Civic will pack a 2-liter naturally aspirated inline-4. Without electrification, this thing is wheezy. From low speeds, it feels more lethargic than the Impreza. It picks up all right from there, and it is hooked up to a very seamless, continuously variable transmission. If you want low running costs and you have a strict budget, I think it should get the job done. But the new Hybrid promises far better performance and efficiency. In the real world, only one of those things held up for me. The engine is primarily a generator. It actually doesn't drive the wheels directly until you're around cruising speeds. I want to say it's like 40 miles per hour. It uses a lockup clutch, so it is a direct drive. So when you're at low speeds, you really get to experience the full efficiency advantage of an electric motor. But at highway speeds, the motor is more power hungry and the direct drive doesn't save the day. I took it on a 300-mile journey in eco mode, babying it as much as I could. I kept the speed between 65 and 70 miles per hour. The conditions weren't extreme, and according to the fuel pump, I got 39 miles per gallon. The car actually told me I got a little bit worse than that. So if you're on the highway more often than not, I wouldn't recommend the Hybrid for its efficiency alone, but its performance, that's a different story. This setup will make 200 horsepower and 232 pound-feet of torque. This will get to 60 in 6.3 seconds according to my testing. But what I think is more impressive is how it uses it. Because again, this is primarily driven by an electric motor. It feels more like an EV. Very quick response, very smooth. Even in its normal mode, this will mimic shifts, and to my surprise, this is one of the most convincing fake shifts that I've encountered so far. And what I think really helps it is the instant torque that gives you this direct connection between the throttle pedal and your acceleration. When you have something like a regular continuously variable transmission, and even like Toyota's eCVT and the Corolla Hybrid, because that doesn't have enough oomph from the motor, it just can't quite give you instantaneous response. The new Camry does a better job of that, but still not to this degree. Over bad roads, you do feel more of the pavement when compared to the Subaru, but it also feels more poised. This too does have independent rear suspension on all grades, and the suspension is also fairly compliant. I've hit a few potholes in this and my spine is still completely intact. If a lot of your roads look like this, you might be a little let down by the Honda, but I think this finds a pretty nice balance between comfort and handling, which the latter is a strong suit to the Civic. While there's not really any more steering feedback when compared to the Subaru, what I do like more about the Honda is how the steering is weighted. It's still on the light side, but it builds up pretty quickly as you're going through corners. This just feels a little more playful. It's just as precise, and I think the suspension here, because it's more firm, allows for a sharper response. It honestly makes me enjoy driving. That's something that I usually only say about the Mazda3 when we're talking small cars. And bringing up to higher speeds, the Hybrid actually has active noise cancellation, and it does in fact reduce cabin volume by a little bit when compared to the Subaru. This and the Impreza also have adaptive cruise and lane centering as standard, both of which work pretty well. Though I still find the Corolla system to be the most refined, the Subaru actually nags you quite a bit, and the Mazda, well, that does next to nothing, because the 3 wants to assert that you are the one in charge. Though they do concede and give you that lane centering tech if you go with the Turbo Premium Plus. On the road, the new Honda Civic has so much going for it. It might not be the most comfortable car or offer the most efficient hybrid, but as a compliant ride, good visibility, and great handling, to the point where it's kind of fun to drive. Now, if you want something more engaging with more flat handling suspension, definitely go with the Civic Si, but its relatively good athleticism now has me questioning if the Mazda is still the best to drive in the segment, so let's find out. For the 71st time, I find myself behind the wheel of a Mazda 3, and I'm still happy to be here. This starts off with a refreshingly traditional powertrain. Well, I guess two powertrains. You have a choice of a 2.5-liter naturally aspirated inline-4 or a turbocharged version of that. In most cases, they'll be hooked up to a 6-speed automatic, and today I have the one without a turbo. This puts out 191 horsepower, and with this buttery 6-speed automatic, it is willing to downshift at a moment's notice. When it does, it feels more potent and linear than the non-hybrid Civic or any Impreza. The gear shifts themselves, especially when you're hustling the car, tend to be slow. At times, without the torque of the forced induction model, it doesn't feel effortless, but with the more expensive engine option, this feels befitting of a luxury badge. And if you want to get sticky with it, you can get a 6-speed manual transmission. The shifter is easy yet satisfying to operate. If you know how to drive a manual and you happen to want a premium trim, which will run you over $30,000 as well, I highly recommend it. That model also comes with front-wheel drive only, though you can drive all 4 wheels on the Carbon Edition or Turbo models. It's a good system too. My friend Zach Pradel of Shooting Cars has driven one over 100,000 miles, and he says it will happily shift power to the rear. It performs well in snow. And one thing that I actually found out recently is that the rear differential actually has a different gear ratio than the front, kind of like the Toyota GR Corolla, which probably explains why it's less timid than some other systems at sending power to the back. So any engine will give you healthy passing power. You can get all-wheel drive, so this should work in any setting, and on the highway, it's well muffled too. Though the biggest selling point historically for the Mazda 3 was its handling, and I think this still has a leg up on the Civic when it comes to its dancing ability. So why is this better? Well, one, I think the steering is a little bit more precise. The ratio itself, maybe it's not as quick, but it feels like every minute input through the wheel is met with the appropriate reaction from the car. I can place it exactly where I want it to go. It's even more natural, but I can actually feel the front end loading up a little bit. And as the speed picks up, I think the steering becomes lighter than that of what you would get with the Honda. It's an engaging car, but the suspension allows a little too much body roll for it to go up against most sport compacts. It also cuts a corner. This is the only car talked about today that will come with a torsion beam rear suspension on every trim. When you have bump after bump, it can get a little jittery, though most of these small imperfections, they make themselves known, but they don't punish you. It might have a slight disadvantage though, compared to the Honda in terms of taking potholes. And when the road isn't perfect, I don't think it's quite as sure-footed as the Honda either. For the long haul, all 3 of these vehicles have been pretty good. I go more into the details on the individual reviews, as each of these do have some common issues, but if the most important thing to you is a lack of drama 10, 15 years down the road, the Corolla is probably the best car. The Mazda, Honda, and Subaru have their own advantages, but the Toyota Corolla has a couple of tricks that the others haven't quite figured out yet. I've said this before, but for a compact to be successful, people need to be able to buy it. The Corolla and Corolla Hybrid are more affordable than the others here, and it also lives up to its reliable reputation. But is this anything more than a sensible proposition? That is a little more debatable. So under the hood, you'll have a 2-liter naturally aspirated inline-4. That's good for 169 horsepower and a 0 to 60 time of around 8 seconds. It comes equipped with a neat, continuously variable transmission that actually has a launch gear, so it feels more responsive and linear off the line, without sacrificing the efficiency advantage that you get with the CVT. If you want an even smarter yet equally buzzy setup, you can go with the hybrid. This actually uses an older 1.8 liter alongside either 1 or 2 permanent magnet motors. The second one gives you all-wheel drive around back. There's no drive shaft connecting the two. That means that you can drive all 4 wheels without sacrificing a whole lot in gas mileage. You can easily get over 50 miles per gallon. It's much more efficient than the Civic Hybrid on the highway. And if that sounds more appealing to you than EV-like response, then this is probably the car that you want. Despite this having just 138 horsepower, because it does have electric assistance that kind of fills in for some of this power band's deficiencies and makes for something that doesn't feel constantly stressed out. Unless you're trying to pass at highway speed, in which case the acceleration slows down and the engine sounds like a Dyson on its last stand. Once the engine calms down, you'll still have to deal with some wind and road noise, and the seat bottoms aren't the most supportive, but they're also not awkwardly stiff. So when I drove one for 6 hours straight last year, I was okay and I got excellent gas mileage. Now, full disclosure, the Corolla I'm driving is a 2023, partially because these hybrids are in high demand and they sell pretty quickly, which can make them hard to source for comparisons. The 2025 is identical. All Corollas are pretty forgiving cars. The base LE non-hybrid technically has a torsion beam, but that doesn't affect things very much. It insulates me from the road a little better than the Honda or Mazda, though unless we're specifically talking about the Corolla, the sporty attitude of the Toyota is surface level. The Corolla is very approachable to drive, the steering is precise. I don't think this feels sloppy in comparison to the Honda or Mazda. It just feels more disconnected. Though you can get the SE, which will slightly firm up the suspension and give you a little more body control. But if you're really wanting something that's fun, I would run from the Corolla. I'd also skip it if you want something premium, or if you just want anything more than the basics. This interior feels cheaper than the others. It's also not as spacious as the Subaru or Honda, especially in hatch form. But it thrives in simplicity. The controls, the infotainment, it's all easy to work with. Wireless CarPlay is standard too, and for 2025, you can get a larger screen if you must. This is a no-frills, sensible econobox that does feel behind the segment in a few ways, but I'm okay with that. Its role in the small car market isn't a glamorous one, but it's important. When it comes to safety, each of these performed well enough to earn an IIHS top safety pick, but the Mazda is the best at crashing. Today's lineup showcases affordable cars that disagree on what's most important. Some of these are borderline luxurious, impressively frugal, highly forgiving, or remarkably well-rounded. Now, the one that stays the most focused on the traditional compact fundamentals is the Corolla. If you just want a pleasant commuter that you can trust with your life and your wallet, the Corolla is the victor, even if it's underwhelming in several ways. The Subaru Impreza could replace a small crossover. It has a utility-first cabin, a capable standard all-wheel drive system, and a ride that ignores the road's imperfections like it's a bad teacher. Despite its best efforts, it's still an appliance. If you're cool with that, alongside Hasbro tech and just okay fuel economy, you'll love the Subaru. Now, choosing between the Honda Civic and the Mazda3 is a difficult one for me, but for the masses, it's probably an easy decision. The Mazda3's stubborn nature makes it the most distinct compact. The brand didn't build the car to prioritize broad appeal. They value design over visibility. They value a traditional power delivery over efficiency. They value fun over maximum forgiveness, and they're willing to sacrifice a little practicality to keep the car from being bloated. These things, along with the manual transmission, make it my choice. However, the Civic, without a doubt, is the better car for more people. It gives you some of the well-built goodness and fun handling of the Mazda, while giving you interior space like the Subaru, and efficiency closer to that of the Corolla. The inevitable problem is that you will pay for all of that. And outside of the trunk and hybrid performance, in no area is the Honda Civic best in class. So if you can pick what matters most to you, then you might find a better fit for less cash. Thanks for watching. And thank you to my channel members for helping me improve my videos. Consider joining for additional content. I'll catch you in the next one.